Gittin Daf Pei Dalid does not contain any Mishnayos, but it does contain two brises that the Gemara analyzes. The first brisa talks about what happens when a man divorces his wife on the condition that she marry a specific individual. And then we'll have our second brisa, which will discuss what happens if he makes an impossible tanai. What's the halacha there? Included in that, the Gemara will discuss what happens if the tanai is not impossible, it's just aser. Then the Gemara will refer back to our previous Mishnah and analyze the next few lines of that Mishnah. So let's begin. The Gemara quotes a brisa, and the brisa is difficult to understand. The Gemara has 5 different explanations, 2 from Rav Nachman and 2 from Rava, what the brisa means. So the brisa says as follows. A man gives his wife a get, and he says, this is on the condition that you marry Ruvain. So the brisa paskins, she should not marry. It doesn't say who, but she should not marry. And if she does marry, she should not leave him. So who are we talking about? What's the brisa mean? There's 2 basic questions have to be answered. Who is she not supposed to marry? And why should she not leave him? And who should she not leave? So the Gemara's first prat is Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says as follows. It means she should not marry that person, the one that she said she has to marry, the one that the husband said she has to marry in order for her to get to Bichal, she should not marry him. And the reason is because it looks like her husband is giving her as a gift to someone else. That is a complete Isser. Couldn't be anything worse than that. Rashi says a man gives his wife as a gift to another man. That can't be, and therefore she should not marry him. Now, if she marries someone else, if she marries a third person, she does not have to get divorced from him. So the first question of this obviously is, how is that possible? How could she stay with someone else if she didn't marry the person she had to in order for the get to be chal? The get's not chal. If the get's not chal, she's still married to her first husband. How could she stay married to someone else? Because of this gzeir that it looks like she's being given as a gift, we're going to allow her to marry someone else, which she's not. She's an ashes ish. We're going to allow her to marry somebody else, be'isser. So that can't be. So the Gemara therefore brings the second shot of Rav Nachman, and it says as follows. She should not, it starts off the same way. She should not marry that Reuven because it'll look like she's been given as a gift to him. If she marries him, then she does not have to get divorced, because we don't make her leave her new husband just because of a gzeir that it looks like a gift. So the Gemara asks, Rava asks, hold on a second, that means that she should not marry him, but the implication seems to be she is allowed to marry somebody else, meaning when the brisa said don't marry, it said don't marry him, that implies someone else she's allowed to marry. How could she be allowed to marry someone else? If she marries someone else, the tanai is not fulfilled. She was only divorced on the condition that she marries this guy. Who says the Gemara, maybe you'll tell me very simple. She'll marry him in the future, meaning her husband says you're divorced on the condition that you marry Reuven. She didn't say only Reuven, that you eventually marry Reuven at some point. So now she's going to marry Shimon. She'll hang out with him for a while. At some point she'll get divorced from him, or after he dies, she'll go marry Reuven. So if you want to say that Pshat, the Gemara says that's a bit of a problem. The Gemara tries to show why that's a problem, and the Gemara will try rejecting it. The problem is that this gets involved in a different machlokes which we learned in Maseches Nedarim. Maseches Nedarim, we learned in machlokes if somebody makes a neder on Tanai that he's going to do something else, do we assume he's going to be able to do that or not? So similar thing here, she's marrying Shimon, assuming she's going to fulfill the Tanai later. Can we rely that she's going to do that? So what's the case there? So the case is, somebody says, I make a neder, I'm asering sleeping today if I sleep tomorrow. That means that if I end up sleeping tomorrow, then it's also for me to sleep today. So now the question is, can she sleep today with the assumption that she's not, that he, it's a he here, that he is not going to sleep tomorrow. So Rabbi Yehuda says, don't sleep today. We don't know if you're going to manage to not sleep tomorrow. You better not sleep today, just in case you end up falling asleep tomorrow. So Rabbi Yehuda clearly does not trust that he's going to be able to keep the Tanai that he plans on. Rav Nachman says, no, it's fine, we trust him. He can sleep today, just make sure that he's not going to sleep tomorrow. We're not afraid that he's going to end up sleeping tomorrow. So here, says Rava, this ends up coming out like Rav Nachman. Meaning, because we're saying that here we're assuming she's going to be able to marry that Reuven at some point in the future, and that's why we're allowing her to marry someone else today. So we're going against Rav Yehuda. So maybe we want to say that this is a pshat. This is why we allow her to marry someone else, because we're assuming, not like Rav Yehuda, that she's going to be able to go against him. So the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says even the one who argues on Rav Yehuda, even Rav Nachman who argues on Rav Yehuda, would not agree here that this is okay, that you could assume this. Because in the case of the sleeping, it's up to the guy who made the neder to make sure he doesn't sleep. He could stick himself with a thorn the entire day tomorrow and do what it takes to stay awake. Here, it's not within her ability to marry Reuven. Maybe her new husband is not going to want to marry, is not going to divorce her. And maybe he's not going to die, and he's not going to divorce her. How do we know that he's going to free her to go marry Reuven and be Mekayim that tonight? Since it's not up to her, we can't assume that that's going to be okay. Therefore, we have a different shot, and this Rava says that the Brisa means as follows. It says she shouldn't marry means she shouldn't marry nobody, not Ruvain and not anybody else. She shouldn't marry Ruvain because it looks like she's being given to him as a gift. She shouldn't marry anyone else because she has to fulfill the Tanai by marrying Ruvain, and we just said she's not supposed to marry Ruvain. Now, if she does marry Ruvain, we don't force her to separate from him just because of this Gzeira. We're not going to separate a woman from her husband. Says the Gemara, there's a brisa that says explicitly this explanation of Rava. It says she can't marry not him and not anybody else, and if she does marry him, she doesn't have to separate from him. Okay, this concludes the Gemara's comment on our first brisa, and now we get to our second brisa, which talks about what happens if we have a Tanai which is impossible to keep. And the Gemara will have a machlokes. The brisa has a machlokes on that, and the Gemara is going to have a machlokes how it applies to a Tanai which is be'isser. I'll have a couple of proofs to that. So the brisa says as follows: a man gives his wife a get, and he says, "Here's your get on the condition that you soar up to the heavens, that you go down to the depths of the earth, that you swallow a reed that's 4 amos long, that you bring me a reed that's 100 amos long, that you walk across the ocean." All these things are not this. All these things are machlokes. So Tanakama says it's no good. It's not a get because she can't fulfill the Tanai, meaning the Tanai is chal. You have to fulfill the Tanai for the get to work. She can't, so the get's batal. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema says kazeh get. He says this is a get. And then Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema adds a rule: any time where there's a Tanai that's impossible to keep, it's void, and therefore the Tanai is meaningless. All he's doing is tormenting her, and there's no real Tanai here, and it gets kosher without having to do anything. Now, it's worthwhile to note Rabbi Yehuda said two things. He said kazeget, and he said klal. Kazeget implies this and not something else. That limits his application, means in some case after where he would not agree that it's a valid get. And klal is a rule that is including something. So he's including and excluding something, and that's going to come to play later in our coming up machlokes. Now, what is the halacha over here? So the Gemara quotes Rav Nachman name of Rav that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. The get is valid, the Tanai is meaningless, and the get is valid. And Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak says we have a Mishnah about Matzia that implies that as well. It says somebody who makes a Tanai that can't be kept, the Tanai is invalid, and the Tanai is batal, and therefore the original deal is on. Okay. Now the Gemara has a question. What if he says, here's you get on the condition that you eat chazer, you eat pig meat? So, meaning on the condition that you do an isser. Is that called impossible or not? So Abaye says that's impossible. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema would say, the Tanai is batal, she's married, she's divorced, the get is chal, and she doesn't have to eat the pig meat. Rava says no. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema would not say that this Tanai is no good. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema would say that she can keep this Tanai. What could she do? She could swallow the pig meat and throw it up, and therefore she'll keep the Isser out of her insides. Now, the Gemara refers back to those words that Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema said. So he said klal and he said kazeget. So Abaye said klal, he's including something. What is he including? He's including this case where he made a Tanai that she has to eat pig meat. That's also considered to be a situation where it is an invalid Tanai and it gets chal. Rava said, no, kazeget. He was excluding. This is the excluding case that is not, the rule does not apply, and here the Tanai is valid, and she does have to fulfill the Tanai. Now, the Gemara is going to explain, according to Abaye, what is kazeget for, and according to Rava, what's klal for. We'll get to that soon. All right, now the Gemara tries to bring some rayas. So the Gemara's first raya is we have a brayso that says as follows. He says to her, here is your get on the condition that you have bia with Reuven, certain individual. So there's nothing wrong there. That's valid. And the Tanai is valid, and it's a good get. And she has to do the bia in order for the get to be good. If she does the bia, it's chal. If she doesn't do the bia, it's not chal. Second case is if she says, here's your get on the condition that you don't have bia with my father or your father. So here we are not concerned. Maybe she's going to do that bia at some point and cancel the get. She's allowed to go get married. We'll assume that she'll keep the Tanai. Now the Mishnah conspicuously leaves something out. He doesn't say, here's your get on the condition that you do have a bia with my father or your father, which would be an isser. So obviously, there's no possibility of making a Tanai, which is an isser. So that's good according to Abaye, who says that a Tanai to do an Isser would be invalid. It's Kasha on Rava, because Rava says you could do such a thing. Rava says you could do a Tanai of eating Chazer. Somewhere answers that. Rava says no, Chazer you could eat, Beheter. She could do something with the Chazer. She could swallow it and spit it out. Now, that she should go marry somebody, even if that person refuses, she could convince him. She could say, here's $100, marry me, so you'll do it beheter. But if you want to make a case that there's a tanai that she should do an isser by having a bia with someone that is also to be boel, who says that person's going to agree to do an isser? Even if she's willing to do the isser, who says he will? And therefore, you can't make such a tanai. It's not within her hands to fulfill. Another Gemara wants to know, according to Rava, what's the klal for? So the Gemara says, very good. So here we found the case of the klal. Here is the rule. This is what's accepted. Here I will agree that Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema would say that this is not a valid tanai because this is impossible for her to keep. Abaye would say, like we said before, klal is to include the case of the eating the pig meat, which is a voided tanai. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema would say that that's no good. What's the case? Which is a good tanai? That's the case where he says, manas, on the condition that you have bia with so-and-so, because she could do that beheter by marrying him. All right, now the Gemara has another kasha. If he gives the get and he says, here is your get on the condition that you eat pig meat, just like we said before, or if she was a Yisraelis on the condition that you eat truma, or if she was a Nazira on the condition that you drink wine. So in all these cases, if she goes ahead and she fulfills the tanai, obviously, which would be be'isr, it's a good get. And if not, it's not a good get. Explicitly like Rava, that the tanai is valid. And against Baye, that the tanai is no good. So Baye answers very simply, this is not Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. This is the Rabbanon. So the Gemara asks, if so, how do you understand the Bryce over here? Why don't you say that this is no good? Because it's a tanai that goes against the Torah. We have a halacha that if somebody makes a tanai that violates halacha, it's no good. The tanai is canceled. So why do the Rabbanon, according to the way Rabbi wants to explain it, and why does Rava in general say that a tanai that he makes, which forces her to be over an isser, is valid? So the Gemara answers, Rav Ada, Breder of Ika says, when we say that you can't make a tanai to do something against the Torah, that's talking about that the person who makes the tanai is making a tanai on the condition that he has a right to violate an isser himself. Like if he says, I'm going to marry you on the condition that I don't have to do the mitzvah of sherik susan aina. You can't uproot a mitzvah based on the tanai that you say. Here, he's not doing an isser. He's making a tanai that she has to do an isser. That is not under the rule of tanai to violate the halacha is batla, because he's not making a tanai to violate any halacha. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? He sure is, because he's forcing her to violate the isser. That means that tanai that he's making is creating an uprooting of this halacha. The Gemara therefore offers a similar and slightly different answer. The Gemara is saying, no, here the tanai is not violating the Torah because he's not saying that I want to fulfill the tanai. He's telling her, you could choose to fulfill the tanai or not to fulfill the tanai. You want to be divorced, fulfill the tanai. You don't, so don't. I'm not telling you what to do. And therefore, there is no tanai that's automatically against the Torah, and it's not batal automatically. It's only with this halacha that Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema said, or the Rabbanon and Rav and Abaye, that we have a cause to cancel the tanai here. The Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah where we saw a halacha, how you redo a get that was given with a line that he said something that invalidates it. The Gemara is going to want to know who is the author of this Mishnah. So we'd seen in the Mishnah that if he gives to her and says, here's your get except for such and such, you're not divorced relative to a certain individual, that's no good. And what should he do? He has to take it back and give it again with the proper instruction that you mutter to everybody. So Gemara wants to know who's the opinion that says you have to actually take it back, and he can't just say, you know what, I changed my mind, you mutter to everyone. So Gemara wants to relate this to a machlokes we saw earlier in Daf Ayin Ches, where he gives her the get, and there is a psul in it that he told her it's a shtar chayv. He didn't tell her what it is. She didn't know what it was. So we had seen that Rav Shimon ben Elazar says he has to take it back from her and give it with the right identity. And Rebbe said, no, we could just explain what it is afterwards. It's fine. You don't have to do it over again. So I want to say this must be Rav Shimon ben Elazar, because it says he has to actually go and give it back. He has to take it back from her and give it back to her again. So the Gemara says, no, Rav Yochanan quotes Rav Kahana. He says, one of yours, because Rav Kahana came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael to learn from Rav Yochanan. He quotes from Rav Kahana. He says that here even Rebbe would agree they have to take it back because this get did have a chalais to some extent. It did passel her for kahuna. Like we said, that the halacha is, it's called reich again, and it does possible if we're going to, since it had some validity, it's taken effect to some extent. If he wants to redo it, he has to take it back. Gemara now goes to the next line of the Mishnah, where we said that if he wrote into the text of the get itself that it has an exception, that she's divorced only relative to most people and not relative to someone else, that's not fixable. You can't just erase it. You have to do a whole new get from scratch. So Gemara goes to Rav Safra, who seems to say the same thing. Rav Safra says it's only if it's written. Rashi explains it means it's only if it's written, and not if he told the Eidim to write it that way. That doesn't possible it, even though he literally told the Eidim to write it that way. But if it's not written, that's not a problem. So the Gemara says, yeah, obviously, the Mishnah said if it's written, it's a problem. If it's not written, it's not. So the Gemara says, no, you may think that the Mishnah was talking about where he didn't tell the Eidim until after they wrote the Toiref of the get. That's the main part that has these specific parts that are relative to this couple. But if he told the Eidim before they wrote those specific things, even if they didn't actually write it, because they wrote that with this in mind, that would possible it. And therefore, Rav Safra is teaching us, no, it would not possible it, even if it was written at that point. Now, Rava disagrees. Rava says, no, if he said this to the Eidim, and they knew that, at the time that they wrote the Toiref, it would possible even if it wasn't written into the get, and you would have to do a whole new get. You wouldn't be able to fix it. And Rava says another similar thing elsewhere. Rava says to people who write the Gittin that if you should yell, be quiet, to the husband from the time he got the instructions until you finish writing the Torah, so that he can't add any Tanai. Rava holds that Tanaim pasel Gittin often, as we shall see at the next stuff, and therefore you should yell to avoid having anything added. The Gemara now quotes a brisa with a related machlokes. It's machlokes about when a Tanai written in a get is a problem. What is the case of the machlokes Tanaim? And we're also going to have to explain how our previous Mishnah fits into this brisa. So the machlokes says as follows. The brisa says that any Tanai, we have an amenas Tanai, that is, a get is given conditionally. That is a machlokes between Rebbe and the Rabbanon, if it's written in the get itself, whether that passels. Now, we're going to assume written in the get itself means that it was told to the witnesses, and therefore there's two possibilities, either before they wrote the Torah or after they wrote the Torah, like we've been discussing up to now. But what the Brisa says is that if the get is written, there you have a machlokes between Rebbe and the Rabbanon. Rebbe says that it passels the get, no matter what the Tanai says, even if the Tanai is kept. The Rabbanon say it does not passel the get. Both agree, however, that if it says a chutz, that if it says that there's an exception to the get doesn't apply in certain circumstances, that's no good according to everybody. That's a psul in the get for sure, and there's no resolving that. So we have this machlokes between Rebbe and the Chachamim, is a Tanai psul or not. So machlokes are Zera and Rava. What are we talking about? Are we talking about before the Torah or after the Torah is written? So Rebbe says the machlokes is before the Torah is written, where it's a much bigger problem, because the Eidim have that in mind when they write it. Rebbe holds that even though it's almanas, which shouldn't be a problem, you have gzeira, chutz, atu almanas atu chutz, and the Rabbanan say there's no gzeira. Almanas is not a problem. It's just a tanai. It's